Yes, good afternoon, good morning, good evenings, wherever we are. Our guest of honor, Honorable Lobin, Lowe, MP, Minister of Agriculture from the Republic of Malawi, Mrs. Erica Muganga, the Principal Secretary in the Ministry of Agriculture, Republic of Malawi, Professor George Kanyama-Phiri, Vice-Chancellor, University of Agriculture and Natural Resources, LUANAR. I see also Professor Richard Nkandawire, who wears so many hats, Chairman, National Planning Commission of Malawi and Chair of Advisory Board of Mapata Institute, Your Excellency, Ambassador Josefa Sacko, Commissioner for Rural Economy and Agriculture, African Union Commission, Ms. Chileshe Kapwepwe, Secretary General for COMESA, Dr. Nwafor, Vice Secretary for AGRA, Maura, Senior Deputy Assistant Administrator for the Bureau for Resilience and Food Security, who is representing USAID, Dr. Miltone Ayieko, Chair of the ReNAPRI Board of Directors, the Malawi conveners, the official host of this conference, from Mapata, represented by Mr. William Chadza, and members from LUANAR, Center for Agriculture Research and Development, directors of all research institutes and all affiliates of ReNAPRI, all protocols observed, all distinguished participants wherever you are in Africa, Malawi, and beyond. Let me welcome you to this 7th ReNAPRI. ReNAPRI stands for Regional Network of Agricultural Policy Research Institutes Annual Stakeholder Conference, whose theme is the Great Reset, Embedding Resilience into African Agriculture. An African network of agricultural policy research institutes, of which CAD is a proud member of those institutes. ReNAPRI, I know much details will be explained by our chair, Dr. Ayieko. Just to preempt some of the things that he's going to say, ReNAPRI was created at the initiative of National Agricultural Policy Institutes to enable them effectively coordinate with each other, share data, collaborate on providing solutions to the common challenges facing the region, and enable national policymakers to learn from experiences of other countries within the region and beyond. As part of the knowledge sharing platform, ReNAPRI conducts annual stakeholder conference, which rotates among member countries. The previous 60th one took place in Kampala, Uganda, and it was at that conference that Malawi was chosen to be a host of this annual stakeholder conference, and specifically CAD from LUANAR was to take lead with support from Mapata Institute. However, due to the COVID-19, we are not able to host everybody physically, but we are still the hosts. So everything that is happening here, be rest assured, we have already been welcomed. It's being hosted by Malawi, the warm heart of Africa. So our meeting is going to be virtual. Therefore, as we are here, we are live probably to all the countries in Africa and beyond. So here, in the opening session, as the hosts, we are privileged to have the Honorable Minister of Agriculture from Malawi, Honorable Lobin Lowe, MP. I'm not even going to introduce him. You'll see him when he's making the opening remarks. But we are also privileged to have the Vice-Chancellor from Lilongwe University of Agriculture and Natural Resources. Can you just... Professor George Kanyama-Phiri, Professor George Kanyama-Phiri, yes, the one raising the hand. We also have the Principal Secretary in the Ministry of Agriculture, Mrs. Erica Maganga. Thank you very much. Yeah, but in here, in this room, I think in the interest of time, we have members of the media from all the main media institutions in Malawi. We also have, as you heard in my salutations, Professor Richard Kandawire, who is also a strategic partner and member of ReNAPRI. We also have the just outgoing research director, Mr. Richard Kachule, and the incoming research director for ReNAPRI at CAD, Professor Charles Jumbe. As I said, in the interest of time, I'm not going to introduce them individually. And we also have the research fellows from Mapata Institute and CAD, LUANAR. So in short, that's what we have here in Lilongwe. But as I've said, let me welcome you to this and this stakeholder workshop. And we wish you all the best. Would have loved to host you here physically, but you know, because of the pandemic, actually the pandemic has taught us to be innovative and adaptive, and this is one of the ways how we have made sure that the pandemic will not stop the stakeholder conference this year. So at this point in time, let me hand over to our chair for the ReNAPRI board, Dr. Miltone Ayieko from Tegemeo Institute, who is going to moderate this session, and I speaking, Chabi Chilongo, director from the Center for Agricultural Research and Development, who is your host. Over to you, Chair, Dr. Miltone.
Thank you very much, Tabi, for that very good welcome and introductions. Welcome everyone to the 7th annual ReNAPRI conference. Your Honorable Lowe, who is the Minister for Agriculture of Malawi, Her Excellency Ambassador Josefa, Sacko, who is the Commissioner of DREA, Her Excellency Secretary General Chileshe Kapwepwe, who I'm told is on how will be joining us shortly. Ms. Maura Barry, who is the Senior Deputy Assistant Administrator at the Bureau for Food Security, Usaid. Dr. Apollos Nwafor, Vice President AGRA. Professor George Kanyama-Phiri, Vice-Chancellor LUANAR, all protocols observed. I want to begin by thanking Malawi, who is which is the host this year for hosting the 7th ReNAPRI conference. This conference is being hosted by two institutions. CAD, which is the Center for Agriculture and Rural Development of Lilongwe University of Agriculture and Natural Resources, and Mwapata, which is a new outfit in Malawi for agricultural policy research. And so we extend our thank you to for hosting this event. Of course, we would have loved to be in Malawi. That was the plan from the very beginning, but you know that COVID had its own plans, and so we are hosting this meeting virtually. Now, the theme of our conference this year is the Great Reset, embedding resilience into African agriculture. And this theme could not have come at an appropriate time. We are very much aware of the challenges that we have faced this year following the COVID-19 pandemic. And it leads to start thinking, how can we make African agriculture more resilient, more prepared to be able to face the shocks, whether they are short-term, medium-term, or long-term. We've seen how the African agriculture has been affected from access to food and issues of food security, from issues of production, and from issues of trade, because Africa relies heavily on interregional trade, and all these have been affected. COVID is not just a public health issue, it is an economic issue as well. And therefore, it led us to really refocus, to rethink, how can we make African agriculture more resilient? And the three words that you will be hearing more often throughout this conference is reflect, reimagine, and needs to reflect where we are coming from, where we are. What do we know? What don't we know? And how can we pick up lessons from the past to move into the future? How can we avoid the challenges that we are facing now, but also in the future? How well prepared are we? But we also need to reimagine, what would an ideal situation be? How can we come up with policies that are really going to address the issues at hand and make us food secure, and not just for Africa, but also for the whole world. But then we also need to reset. If our policies are not working, we need to rethink new ways that will make our policies work. So those are three terms, those are three words that you will be hearing more often in this 3-day workshop. We are all aware that the continent relies heavily on agriculture, and therefore this conference is really a platform where we share ideas, we share information from the work that we have been doing throughout the year, but also to sensitize our governments, our private sector, civil society, even the media, on how we can be able to tackle some of these challenges that we do face. ReNAPRI is a network of 10 member countries drawn from Eastern, Central, Southern, and West Africa, with aspirations to cover pretty much most of Africa. Our mandate is to really come together, collaborate, share ideas, share evidence, and address the continental challenges from the lessons that we learn either nationally or regionally or continentally. This conference here really touches some of the key discussions that are at the heart of Africa at the moment. We have organized 3 days of conference. The first day today, which begins with this official opening, but also goes into two very key presentations. We want to reflect and imagine. And one of the first, we would be seeing, presentations around the COVID and how we can share what we already know, what can we learn, what we know or what we don't know. And then that will usher us into the second presentation on the elephants, gazelles, and survival entrepreneurs, looking at the value chain issues of African agriculture and how we can better position ourselves by understanding what kind of enterprises we have, and how we can move those struggling enterprises into viable enterprises that will move agriculture, African agriculture, in the right direction. And we hope that these two discussions today will really set the pace for the activities that we are likely to see, that we are going to have tomorrow, where we will be discussing on how we can build resilience, resilient value chains for inclusive agricultural transformation, and then delve into the African continental free trade area, a journey to self-reliance in an age of uncertainty. That will be followed by a road to Abuja 2. I would just want to mention that ReNAPRI has been involved in these two areas in a mighty way, beginning of last year when we held a very successful session on the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, where we brought in key experts from the private sector, the government, and the civil society to be able to reimagine how we can structure the free trade in Africa. And then each country have already signed and also already mandated the agreement. But also ReNAPRI is involved as a technical expert or technical team to inform the road to and IFDC and others. We are carrying out studies and discussing on how we can be able to inform the processes of Abuja 2 that is following from the first fertilizer conference that was held in Abuja in 2006. So the network is really keen to be able to partner with our organizations like African Union Commission and COMESA, so that we can be able to support this process going forward. I believe that most of that will be mentioned during the presentations. But our appeal at this point is that we will be reaching out to Madame Josefa and also Madame Chileshe Kapwepwe on ways that we can support this process going forward. We know how important it is. We are taking stock of what has worked and seeing how we can scale those in order to improve fertilizer use within Africa. So we will be knocking at your doors, Your Excellency Josefa and Your Excellency Chileshe, when the time comes. Now, I want to conclude by saying that as a Pan-African network, we are keen to work very closely with the regional economic communities and with AUC to be able to provide the evidence that they need in order to make decisions. We are aware of the need, the very great need that exists in sharing evidence, and we as the researchers are ready to provide that needed resource. Now, with that, I want to welcome you all to enjoy these 3 days of presentations that we are going to have. And I want to then now turn into invite the key personalities to officially open this conference. To begin, I want to invite the Vice-Chancellor Professor Kanyama-Phiri to grace the occasion and provide us with opening remarks. As he comes, I just want to say a few words about him. Vice-Chancellor Kanyama-Phiri is Vice-Chancellor of Lilongwe University of Agriculture and Natural Resources. Professor Phiri is an established researcher. He joined the crop production department of Lilongwe University of Agriculture in 1975, but he has risen through the ranks to become the Vice-Chancellor since 2012. Professor Kanyama-Phiri has also been departmental coordinator of annual field days, Youth Week projects, and the pasture and crop museums. Professor Kanyama is an established researcher. He has won many awards and scholarships, and we are really honored to have you, sir, the Vice-Chancellor, to give us opening remarks, given that this conference is being hosted by LUANAR. In your capacity as the head of the institution, please welcome Professor Kanyama-Phiri to give us some opening remarks. Thank you.
The guest of honor, Honorable Lobin Lowe, MP, Minister of Agriculture in Malawi, Professor Richard Nkandawire, Chairman, National Planning Commission of Malawi and Chair of Advisory Board for Mapata Institute, Your Excellency, the Ambassador, Josefa Lionel Correa, Sacko, Commissioner for Rural Economy and Agriculture, African Union Commission, Ms. Chileshe Kapwepwe, Secretary General for COMESA, Dr. Apollos Nwafor, Vice President of AGRA, Maura, Senior Deputy Assistant Administrator for the Bureau for Resilience and Food Security, representative of the USAID, Dr. Miltone Ayieko of the ReNAPRI Board of Directors, the Malawi conveners of this conference. Here I'm recognizing the Director of the Center for Agricultural Research and Development, CAD, Dr. Tabi Chilongo, and also Mr. William Chaza, who is the Acting Executive Director of Mapata. And all your teams are duly recognized. Directors of all research institutes and all affiliates of ReNAPRI, all protocols duly observed, just in case I omitted a very important position. All distinguished participants, wherever you are, in Africa and beyond. Ladies and gentlemen, receive warm greetings from the warm heart of Africa, Malawi. It is with much pleasure and delight that I stand here before you to offer my remarks at this year's annual conference for the Regional Network of Agricultural Policy Research Institutes, whose acronym is ReNAPRI. Before I go further, however, allow me to commend the board of ReNAPRI for organizing this conference and for deciding to have the Lilongwe University of Agriculture and Natural Resources as the host of this conference. It's an honor for us. Through the Center for Agricultural Research and Development. It is an honor bestowed upon LUANAR and of course on the government of Malawi for hosting this very first teleconference, which has happened because of the COVID-19 pandemic that has made it impossible to have a face-to-face conference. Our guests of honor, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, your participation in this conference today is testimony enough of your dedication and commitment to propel the African continent to greater heights of economic development through efficient performance of agriculture sector, which is also the major economic sector of most African economies. Our guests of honor, distinguished delegates, and participants, I am reliably informed that the theme for this year's annual conference is the Great Reset, embedding resilience into African agriculture. This theme is well befitting as the global economy is experiencing the worst economic recession in history as a result of the coronavirus, commonly referred to as COVID-19 pandemic, that has devastated the world economy, more so in agricultural-dependent economies such as our country. It is with no doubt that such economies need to develop resilient agricultural systems that will result in increased production, sustained food security and household incomes, increased trade among African countries, and overall economic prosperity of the African continent. By bringing this virtual conference of highly qualified professionals and gurus in various disciplines within agriculture and related sectors, this conference has created a platform for these professionals to share knowledge and experience, as well as making policy recommendations that will help our agricultural sector to recover from the COVID-19 shock, and proposed strategies to develop the resilience of the agricultural sector. It is also with my considered hope and expectation that the various African governments will consider the recommendations that come from this conference and implement them accordingly for purposes of rebuilding our economies and developing resilience in the agricultural systems across the African continent. I would also like to thank all the presenters for accepting to be part of this important event. I know you are busy people, but you managed to find time within your busy schedules to make presentations for this event. To everyone, I say thank you very much for honoring the invitations to attend this conference. I would like to end by thanking you all very much for your attention and to wish you a fruitful conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof, for those warm welcoming remarks. Next, I would want to invite Dr. Apollos Nwafor, the Vice-Chancellor, Policy and State Capability of AGRA. Dr. Apollos holds a PhD in public policy and administration, has a wealth of experience across Africa on issues of development and implementation of Pan-African strategies, and leading and managing programs covering education, extractives, public health, agriculture, water, and sanitation. And so he is one person who I really, we would really be happy to hear from as well, given his wealth of knowledge. I want to invite Dr. Nwafor.
Thank you, Chair. I believe everyone can hear me very well. I would like to, first of all, thank you for inviting me to, be part of this conference. I think ReNAPRI has actually been a force to reckon with as far as research, and providing evidence for policy analysis and informing reforms in the agricultural sector. And I think at this point, at this 7th annual conference, it's important to recognize all the efforts that ReNAPRI has made. And I'd like to thank you and all the rest of the team, from the chair to the leadership, as well as all the research analysts within ReNAPRI. So thank you for all your efforts. It's been helpful, and we've seen some changes as a result of the work that you've done over the years. I'd like to recognize Your Excellency, the Minister for Agriculture for the Republic of Malawi, Honorable Lobin Lowe, Your Excellency, Madame Josefa Sacko, the Commissioner for Department for Rural Economy and Agriculture at the African Union Commission, also Madame Chileshe Kapwepwe, who's the Secretary General for COMESA. I also like to recognize Maura Barry, who's representing the assistant to the administrator, and of course, Dr. Miltone Ayieko, yourself as chair of the board of directors, and Professor George Kanyama-Phiri, the Vice-Chancellor for the Agriculture University in Malawi. And of course, to all our panelists and ladies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen who are part of this conference. First of all, I would like to say that this continent has experienced a lot in the last 2 years, actually, because it all started not with COVID, but actually with the low-cost invasion in the Horn of Africa, and which is now threatening parts, of West Africa today. And we were trying to still recover from that when COVID hit us, last December, and then has, sort of taken a toll on African economies over time. As much as some analysts are saying to us that, well, COVID is no longer a crisis, but its impact is being felt. But, the data is showing us that, it's not just in, because, the prediction was that it was going to only rise in the Europe and North America, but we've seen a second wave of rising cases, even here in Africa and in the country where I live, we're raising questions. But thankfully, we're seeing that we're near, getting vaccines that should help. So hopefully 2021 is going to be a good year once these vaccines are finally approved. And I think the question will be how we will ensure or how the international community will ensure that these vaccines get across, to everyone, the rich and the poor, to ensure that there's not going to be inequality in the distribution or access to these vaccines. Now, the issue here is not just a health crisis. It's because this health crisis has, led us to, a food crisis in many parts. Hunger spots have increased. We've seen the statistics from FAO, from organizations like FAO, the World Food Program, from IFRI, from AGRA ourselves. where we're saying to us that, the pockets of hunger will increase by at least another 20% by the time we get to the end of this year, which we're near to that. And of course, the IMF has told us that we probably will not return to pre-COVID economies until 2023. And that is if, the vaccines are available, by 2021. Hopefully they should be, but the issue here is that, as we begin to reflect on how far we have come as a continent, as far as inclusive agricultural transformation is concerned, as far as ensuring, that we have progressed, we can see from across board that there's been huge progress. And maybe if you do refer to the CADEP, the latest CADEP report, which is produced by the African Union, you see that quite a number of countries have progressed. 9 of them in particular exceeded expectations, but some countries also relapsed, and that's something to reflect on. We've also seen that investments in agriculture actually reduced this year to a certain extent, despite the need to address a looming food crisis, because governments were deeply concerned about the possible health crisis that was breaking out as a result of COVID-19. And I think it's important for us to also reflect on the fact that despite these challenges, the continent has thrived. We've seen a number of countries who have been able to ensure that their populations are still being fed. The question then was, around the nutrition, of the foods that were made available, and then issues around lack of policy predictability because of cross-border issues like non-tariff barriers as a result of the pandemic. I mean, one example is where we saw across certain borders within the East Africa region, where drivers had to wait for 4 or 5 days to be tested, reconfirmed, and then there was the logistics issue of how they were going to move across the border, who was going to drive, who's positive and who's not, and how do you manage security and all that. So all that brought some policy somersault and challenges with policy predictability, which is something that we're learning from as AGRA, and of course we're sure other stakeholders are learning. We've seen that borders or rather lockdowns are easing up, but it's the impact on movement of food, access to food, and at the right quality is still a challenge across board, especially with the fact that the private sector began to see challenges with engaging in the agricultural sector, especially private sector organizations that were responsible or were playing a lot of role around logistics for trade and movement of food. That became a very critical issue. While that may seem to have improved, but much more is desired to make sure we get back to what used to be. But here's the thing. The thing is that we're not thinking about getting back to what used to be before COVID. We need to get back to what things should look like so that we're more resilient to future shocks like the locust invasion, the fall armyworm, and the COVID, which actually had huge impact, on food security in the continent. I mean, if we consider the fact that, quite the hunger spots across have increased, farmers have lost income, we've seen increase in post-harvest losses, and the lack of policy predictability, then you will understand, the impact this has made. So the question is, we cannot go back to what we used to do before. We have to think about what does the new normal look like so that we're building resilience and we're prioritizing public investments, in agriculture to make sure that despite, what we've been through, that we're able to build back better, to recover, of course, and, ensure that Africa does not become the only hungry continent by 2030. And that's why I believe one of the things we want to reflect and, you know, prioritize as far as public investments are concerned, you know, and I think we will be thinking through that throughout this conference. The positive issues that have come out of this, you know, we saw the African Union, you know, with its partners, you know, setting up a ministerial task force after Her Excellency, you know, convened a meeting of ministers of agriculture, trade and finance earlier this year. You know, I think that was a very smart move for the continent, and we do hope that the task force that was set up, you know, will be able to achieve its results. And for us in AGRA, we are, you know, we have made moves to ensure that we support that task force. One of the things we're looking at now is to, you know, see how we can provide support to the AUC, you know, in our own little way, to look at the food security situation. So we're working on a food security platform that should be able to be, you know, provide a policy advice, you know, and ensure that up to date data is available, you know, for the AU to be able to provide advice to governments and work with its partners, you know, to support and address every possible food insecurity challenges that countries, you know, are facing. The other positive thing is that quite a number of countries in the continent are saying to us, look, we are now developing economic recovery, growth and stability strategies. You know, so the political economy agenda is changing as a result of COVID. And that's a very beautiful thing, because then what it means is that agriculture then takes a center stage for rebuilding our economies and also creating new jobs and employment, you know, for people. As you know, the ILO had said that 81 million jobs were lost this year as a result of the pandemic, you know, and most of them informal. And the informal economy in this continent is, as much as it's informal, is a lifesaver to millions of people who are living below the poverty line. So those economic recovery and growth plans that countries are looking at is very pivotal and will play a critical role in bringing back life to our economies, as well as ensuring that, you know, agriculture plays a greater role for economic growth and development within the continent. The question is, you know, what sort of data will they have available to them to plan, to strategize and to prioritize public investments and crowding private sector? So beyond the public investments that needs to be made, those economic recovery and growth plan must consider the role private sector is going to play going forward. You know, and we need to think about that seriously. What sort of data and statistics are we going to use to ensure that private sector is comfortable, you know, to be part of those achieving those economic recovery and growth plans that governments, you know, are developing. And I think we need to take a strategic approach going forward from here as we reflect, as we reprioritize, you know, whatever public investments that we need to make to build back better, as well as, you know, grow our economies. We know that agriculture is being at the center of economic growth is not new. We know that within the 70s, quite a number of African countries were talking about, like, what we now know as the Green Revolution or green economies. You know, they are not necessarily new. But what is new now is the fact that the context within the continent has changed. And what does that mean? It means that we need to look at the emerging issues that are facing us. One is about building institutions that will be able to manage future shocks. I don't think that was something that was usually considered as a top priority, right? That we need to think about that. And what does that mean? It means that institutions must have very credible and effective data management systems that help them to plan better, you know, prepare better, and build resilience against some of these shocks. Second is around looking again at actually at the smallholder farmers. who for themselves, they may seem like, oh, we're just planting, but actually they do have lots of information. And I can say that authoritatively because when I go to the field, I talk to them and I see them and I see that they understand these things better. Maybe not the way we understand our science, but they understand it in such a way that helps them to plant. The question is, what sort of enabling environment are we going to create going forward? Because COVID has taught us that, the enabling environment was fragile. So what more can we do to ensure that the enabling environment is able to withstand the shocks and ensure that our smallholder farmers, their incomes are increasing, that their products are getting to the market at the right price, and that we're able to ensure that, they don't remain poorer for farming, but they get better, because then it attracts them to do more and do better for saving the lives of, themselves and of course the millions of people who are still going to bed hungry. A third issue is around making sure that we are strengthening the political agenda to ensure that agriculture is part of the broader political agenda of our governments, because then it's a win-win for everybody. There's no loser here, and what does that mean? It means that our models of prioritization to ensure that government has the right evidence to make the decisions is critical going forward. So one of the things we've been looking at is models of policy prioritization so that governments can make the right decisions, ensure that their political agenda is translated into real programs that deliver for the people, and that is a critical gap that we probably need to address, going forward as we get towards 2030. And finally, I would like to say here that, we need to also rethink leadership for the continent, particularly leadership for the agriculture sector. And the reason why I say that is because the agriculture sector is not a standalone sector. It has links to gender, to youth, to women, to development finance, and of course to digitization. So as we begin to think about the leadership, we need to think about how our leadership looks at the big picture. For example, one of the things I'm sure you all know this, that we've learned is that we had to digitize extension services as a result of COVID to ensure that farmers can get inputs, and that despite the challenges that farmers are able to plant, get access, to markets, which is where we began to review the market systems, our market systems approach, and domestic supply chains, and of course that then supports, making cross-border trade for agricultural goods and food in particular, effective, particularly during this period. So I think these are things that, we need to, as we look at public investments prioritization, these are areas that we probably need to think about. And to say thank you to you again for inviting me, and I look forward to engaging more in this conference. Back to you, moderator. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nwafor, for that insightful remarks. Indeed, we really thank AGRA for the efforts that they have already put in place. One on the food security platform, the task force on the regional task force on food security, but also just the support on issues that are data related. As you have mentioned, data is needed to inform the public investments. And one of the key areas that ReNAPRI has been keen to support, even the AGRA initiative, is on the policy prioritization using value chain approach. And some of that will be presented during this seminar. But I also concur with you that we must have institutions that have credible and effective data management systems. And leadership is key. The context within agriculture has changed. We can't use yesterday's solutions for today's and tomorrow's problems. So thank you very much for those very insightful remarks. Next, it is my pleasure now to invite Ms. Maura Barry, Senior Deputy Assistant Administrator at the Bureau for Resilience and Food Security of Usaid. Ms. Barry has extensive working knowledge in international development, over 30 years, most of that in Africa. And, you know, in her role, she oversees the strategic direction and implementation of the Feed the Future programs in the field and the Bureau's efforts to engage and build partnerships with private sector and the community. Before that, she has also been the deputy of the Center of Excellence on Democracy, on Human Rights. These are issues that you know, tie in with the what Dr. Nwafor has talked about on issues of leadership. So it is my humble pleasure to invite you, Ms. Maura, to make your comments, your remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Milton. Honorable Minister of Agriculture from Malawi, Lobin Lowe, Her Excellency AUC Commissioner Sacko, Her Excellency Secretary General of COMESA, Kapwepwe, Professor Kanyama-Phiri, ReNAPRI Secretariat, and AGRA Vice President, Dr. Apollos Nwafor, all the center directors, member researchers, and conference participants, and all the other distinguished guests. And can I say good morning? It's morning where I am. Good afternoon, good evening. It's really an honor to be here and help open up this 7th annual ReNAPRI conference on such an important and very timely topic of embedding resilience into African agriculture. Of course, this year's conference theme resonates with USAID, and especially in the bureau that I lead, which is USAID's Bureau for Resilience and Food Security, that also leads on the US government's Feed the Future initiative. We all know that this year has highlighted more than ever before, right? In 2020, the need to make food systems more resilient. And as Dr. Milton underscored when he was speaking earlier, we've seen the pandemic disrupt agricultural supply chains, increase food security, and really constrain government budgets. So how we respond, how we recover, how we rebuild will have a big impact on the resilience of food systems in the future. And sound evidence is super critical and for helping governments and others respond in ways that strengthen resilience and inclusion, not just today, but in the future. So I have 3 points that I want to offer to our discussion today for you to think about as you reflect, as you reimagine, and as you reset. I want to say, first of all, thank you. Thank you for investing all of your time and all of your skills towards building the strong evidence base that every country needs for making decisions about agricultural policy. I don't know if some of you've seen it, but according to a recent study, international agricultural research over the past 5 years alone resulted in a 10-fold return on investment. And of course, policy research is a key pillar of all of those investments. And as we all know, policymakers are really facing tough trade-offs these days. We need to look to the evidence on the potential impacts of the decisions being made, both short-term and long-term, and understand who will be affected by how much, and really think through all of that before policies are chosen. We know that local policy research institutions are best placed to provide this kind of evidence, and ReNAPRI can really help coordinate and is helping coordinate research by local institutions to have meaningful regional and continental impacts. And as already mentioned, one topic that you'll be discussing over the course of these 3 days is the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, which we at USAID see as an unprecedented opportunity to build on the impressive set of commitments that African heads of states have taken toward expanding trade and creating, or should I say reimagining, the largest free trade area in the world. This agreement has enormous potential for African growth and development. for lifting tens of millions of Africans out of extreme poverty, accompanied by large wage gains also for women. And I think all of you African policy researchers can help your citizens, help private sector and policymakers to better understand the benefits and the trade-offs across the economy and to act in ways that accelerate progress towards eliminating poverty and hunger. And so my second point is I want to commend you for the selection of this year's conference topic, resilience. USAID is proud and pleased to be part of several of the research results that I understand you'll be seeing throughout the conference, such as the policy responses to address the COVID-19 impacts. I think as we all know, to improve food security, we need to better understand how to make food systems more resilient, to make them more resilient to the myriad of shocks and stresses, as we just heard from Dr. Apollo Nwafor, and he underscored, are increasing in frequency, intensity, and complexity, and also in impact. And so it's no longer a matter of if they will happen, but really when. And so your research on risk analysis is going to help public and private sector leaders identify, anticipate, and plan for shocks to climate, to plant and livestock pests, to pathogens and diseases. And ultimately, this research can help local governments and other stakeholders, such as the private sector, anticipate and respond to policy needs in an evidence-based way. For example, policies for reducing risks, such as investment in crop and animal disease control services, can create opportunities and encourage investment from the private sector. Your research can also help shape policy decisions that help the private sector to better understand and to respond to risks and opportunities that serve the public interest, can help market systems to deliver more inclusive growth and make farming households more resilient to these stresses. And so my third and final point is, I'm pleased to see researchers and public and private sector representatives and policymakers in the same room, even if that means that many of us have had to gather here virtually and are not with those of you that are there in the warm heart of Africa, the beautiful country of Malawi. All of you participating in the conference are needed to reach sound and equitable policy decisions. And the work that you do, it matters so much. And I encourage you at this conference to present the evidence and to discuss and to argue and to debate. And finally, I encourage you to make recommendations for pathways forward towards more resilient agriculture and stronger food systems. We all know that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And seeing such a diverse range of stakeholders today, all committed to helping end global hunger, gives me, I think, gives all of us hope, right? So thank you for inviting me to give these remarks and help open up the conference. And I wish you all a productive 3 days. Thank you. Back over to you, Dr. Milton.
Thank you, Maura, for those very kind remarks. And you know, ReNAPRI is very happy to be associated with the USAID. Currently, one of the projects that we are engaged in is the Innovation Lab, the Feed the Future Innovation Lab on policy, research, and influence. And true, as you say, research, investment on research yields tenfold. And for us, we find ourselves, very happy and honored to be involved in this research, but also to be associated with USAID. Thank you very much for those kind remarks. Now it's my pleasure to invite Her Excellency, the Secretary General COMESA, Madam Chileshe Kapwepwe. Madam Kapwepwe serves as the Secretary General, and she is a chartered accountant and holds a master's degree in business administration. She also has a long experience, a long career of experience that spans over 30 years in middle and top management in various sectors, including the motor industry, trade facilitation, quality assurance, and aviation, to mention a few. She has worked as a deputy, as the managing director of the National Airports Corporation, deputy minister of finance, and also has been a member of parliament and an executive director of at the International Monetary Fund. We are honored, Madam Kapwepwe, that you found time to join us. So I want to invite you to make your remarks as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. And good afternoon, good morning, depending where you are. It's my pleasure to join this conversation. Honorable Lowe, Minister of Agriculture of the Republic of Malawi, Excellency Ambassador Sacko from the Commissioner of Rural Economy and Agriculture at the African Union, Maura, the Senior Deputy Assistant Administrator for the Bureau for Resilience and Food Security at USAID, Dr. Nwafor, Vice President for AGRA, Dr. Miltone Ayieko, the Chair of the ReNAPRI Board of Directors, who has just kindly introduced me, and all other stakeholders that are participating in this meeting this afternoon. Warm greetings from COMESA, and it's my pleasure to be part of the 7th Annual Regional Work Network of Agriculture Policy Research Institutes ReNAPRI Shareholder Conference. I'd like to commend ReNAPRI for organizing this very timely conference and for allowing us to be a part of this very important dialogue on how Africa can design the agriculture and food systems to endure future external shocks. The theme for this conference is very apt, titled The Great Reset, Embedding Resilience into African Agriculture. And it's crucially at this time when African governments are grappling with the economies due to the impact of the COVID-19. The pandemic is affecting all sectors of the economies, but the impact on the agriculture and agri-food systems is one of particular importance. The agri-food systems, of course, form part, as we know, of the largest economic sectors in most of our member states, and of course in Africa as a whole, ranging from production to industry and services. It's also one of the leading employment sectors with strong forward and backward linkages within rural settings as well as other sectors in the economy. As documented in a number of studies, the COVID-19 pandemic has affected countries and continues to affect the agriculture and food systems in complex ways. This includes limiting of movements and availability of labor for farm work, poor access to agri inputs by producers, poor access to finances for agriculture activities, restricted access to markets, closure of SME agriculture, agribusiness, loss of livelihoods and income, and increased food insecurity and environmental degradation. Distinguished delegates, COVID-19 is indeed a wake-up call for us to urgently build the agriculture and food systems that can endure all types of external shocks. It is important to know that even before the pandemic, African agriculture and agri-food systems faced the daunting triple challenge of concurrently providing food and nutrition security to the African growing population, advancing equitable livelihoods for millions of people, working along the agriculture and agri-food value chains, and ensuring environmental sustainability of the sector. Africa's population is projected to double by 2050. That would be 2.5 billion people. This means that more than a quarter of the world's people would be in Africa and requiring a significant increase in the production of affordable, healthy, and nutritious food. Yet African government policy efforts have not yet largely been moving at the same pace and in this direction. Africa still has problems of food and nutrition insecurity, high poverty levels, and unsustainable agriculture and food production, as well as consumption practices that are leading to biodiversity degradation. The unanticipated shock of COVID-19 underlies the urgency of moving from business as usual to start focusing on how we can reposition and reset so that we can start moving in response to not only the shocks, but to the future that we have to contend with. Distinguished delegates, COVID-19 is compelling us to make urgent decisions to ensure food security chains continue to function, and then thus the need to address immediate disruptions occasioned by the pandemic. Africa's fundamental focus should therefore be on investing in the medium and long-term goals of resilience, sustainable and productive agriculture and food systems in the continent. In this regard, our governments and institutions need to ensure that policies designed to contribute to the medium and long-term goals of building resilience into agriculture and food systems are reinforced, not undermined, by short-term policy actions put in place just to deal with the immediate crisis, including COVID-19 pandemic. Sustained investments are needed to improve the resilience of agriculture and food system, not just because of the current pandemic, but also to the multitude of shocks and stress that face our countries in the continent. These include floods, droughts, animal and crop pests, conflicts, and so on, that can affect the agriculture and food sector on the continent. Increased resilience is therefore essential if food security and livelihoods and other sustainable development goals are to be met in the context of a changing climate and other environmental emergencies. In order to deal more effectively with the triple challenge of ensuring food and nutrition security, equitable livelihoods, and environmental sustainability, African governments would need to strengthen and consistently implement policies that bolster regional agriculture and food system rather than focusing only on domestic self-sufficiency. So the research and the role of researchers in providing evidence to inform and support appropriate policy formulation cannot be overemphasized. Governments and the institutions would also need to review where necessary, reform existing policies, regulations that jeopardize sustainability and reduce resilience. This is in addition to revisiting current resilience toolkits for farmers and other producers faced with shocks to ensure they promote sustainable practices. As a continent, we need to have the greater focus on further opening up of markets and enhancing intra-regional trade in agriculture commodities and agri-foods, and indeed in attracting investment into the sector, as was alluded to by previous speakers. This would require that to effectively address the sanitary and phytosanitary and food safety issues. The COMESA SADC EAC tripartite arrangements and the African Continental Free Trade Area present huge opportunities for enhancing intra-African trade in agricultural commodities and food. Africa would also need to significantly increase resources to support agricultural research as a public good, to develop, transfer, and disseminate technologies, innovations, and management practices for building resilience of agriculture and agri-food systems in the continent. These technologies, innovations, and management policies need to be well adapted to the agroecological context, market responsive, and climate resilience. So what does COMESA do to build resilience into the regional infrastructure food systems? COMESA works with a multiplicity of regional, continental, and global institutions to guide public and private investments in agriculture, natural resources, trade and food security in the region, and to contribute to the realization of the goals and aspirations of CAADP Malabo commitments. These include working with the African Union, the African Development Bank, the EU, Usaid, and other UN agencies. We also, of course, work with other regional economic communities, with AGRA, and other research organizations such as ReNAPRI. Together with member states and partners, COMESA developed a regional COVID-19 food and nutrition response plan that will address immediate to short-term food and nutrition security and livelihood needs of the vulnerable, and the medium-term food security and livelihoods economic needs of the population. The response plan integrates its interventions into long-term regional agriculture development and integration agenda. The strategic priorities of the plan include boosting agriculture productivity, increasing regional market access and trade, strengthening enabling regional policies and regulations, and building resilience of agri-food systems and ecological biodiversity, and strengthening regional coordination and strategic partnership. I should add here that COMESA has the vantage point of having 21 member states who we can bring around the table to discuss the issues of harmonization of policies and regulations, which will support the trade and value chain establishment, which means that we're taking a regional approach, and this enhances the capacity of the region and the continent as a whole to attract a larger scale investment into the region. COMESA is also specifically promoting, supporting member states to adopt climate smart agriculture practices and technology to enhance resilience of agriculture production systems throughout the region. As I conclude, distinguished delegates, may I reiterate that COVID-19 pandemic is a wake-up call to urgently embark on resilience building of Africa agriculture and agri-systems. This will only be achieved through strong collaboration and partnerships between the public and private sector, including civil society organizations. So this kind of dialogue and exchange of ideas and conversation that ReNAPRI has given us the occasion today is really welcome and should be supported by all. As COMESA, we're open to partnerships that will help us to leverage technical and financial resources to build the resilience needed in agriculture and food systems, as well as ecosystem biodiversity of the region. As I conclude, I wish you all fruitful deliberations, and I look forward to the outcomes that will help support the region and member states in addressing this very critical time issues around resilience and continuity in ensuring that food security prevails in the continent. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for that very strong message to us that COVID is a wake-up call to build resilience in agriculture, in African agriculture, and that support that is needed from the researchers and working very closely with you. We are very happy that already we have started those discussions, and we'll be knocking your door soon, so that we can see areas of, of synergy as we move along and addressing the agricultural transformation process in Africa. Next, I want to now invite Your Excellency, Ambassador Josefa Sacko, the Commissioner for Rural Economy and Agriculture of the African Union Commission. Ambassador Josefa is a seasoned personality. She has been a minister for environment. She has served as an ambassador. She responsible for climate change, and she has been an advisor to the Minister for Agriculture. She has overseen food security, eradication of hunger and poverty reduction, among other things. We are really honored that she is able to join us here today. I would also therefore humbly ask her to make her remarks. Ambassador Sacko.
Thank you, Dr. Miltone, our moderator for this important event. And good afternoon, every one of you from Addis Ababa, and good morning wherever you are, depending on where you are. Your Excellency Lobin Lowe, MP, Minister of Agriculture of the Republic of Malawi. Her Excellency Chileshe Kapwepwe, my dear sister, Secretary General for COMESA, Madam Maura, Senior Deputy Assistant Administrator for the Bureau for Resilience and Food Security, USAID. Professor George Kanyama-Phiri, Vice-Chancellor, LUANAR, Malawi, Republic of Malawi. Dr. Apollo Nwafor, my dear brother, Vice President of AGRA. Dr. Miltone Ayieko, the Chair of the ReNAPRI Board of Directors, the stakeholders in the African Agricultural Development Agenda. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, all protocol duly observed. It is my pleasure to deliver these remarks during the opening section of the 7th Annual ReNAPRI Stakeholder Conference, which is being held under the theme, The Great Reset, Enabling Resilience into African Agriculture. Allow me to begin by thanking the chair of ReNAPRI Board of Directors, Dr. Miltone Ayieko, for inviting me to speak here today and to congratulate you for organizing another ReNAPRI conference despite the challenges that we are all facing today as a result of COVID-19 pandemic. Let me also thank the government of the Republic of Malawi through the Minister of Agriculture, Honorable Lobin, Lowe, MP, for hosting this important event. Honorable Minister, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the African Union Commission supports the issue of evidence-based agricultural research as the foundation for informing policy in our member state and regional economic community for the purpose of building resilient agriculture food system. We believe that policy decisions are more effective when they are informed by available evidence that is backed by rational, rigorous, and systematic analysis. We all know that policy, which is based on rigorous evidence, produces better results and impact on the ground. On the ground than policy that is not supported by data and even that which is ideologically driven. It is for this reason that the head of state and government of the African Union endorsed the 2003 Comprehensive African Agriculture Development Program, CADEP, which highlights the importance of enhancing research and technology dissemination and adoption. In order to further strengthen their resolve, our leaders endorsed the 2014 Malabo Declaration, which, among other commitments, underscored the need to increase and sustain funding for agricultural research and development. Ladies and gentlemen, the era of COVID-19 has, along with other issues, revealed the necessity for real-time data generation in order to support effective and efficient decision-making. This unprecedented disease has threatened the strength and positive trajectory of Africa's agricultural development, which has seen throughout these decades. COVID-19 has also brought about the need for increased innovation and highlighted the significance of robust and resilient food systems that are able to function under extreme circumstances. This system must ensure that all citizens have access to sufficient supply of affordable and nutritious food on our continent. In addition, it is essential for us to ensure that regional food trade in Africa is given high priority despite the current restrictions that have been placed on the movement of persons across the border. And we know that we have launched our IFCFTA that is going to enter into force on the 1st of January. This is a very good instrument for us to start trading on agricultural products and services. We know that 75% of the trade in Africa is derived from this sector. So we really need to work hard and produce this service to our populations. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no doubt that agricultural research and development will continue to play an important role in this matter that I have mentioned above. In this regard, it is an urgent need to mobilize resources from both the public sector and private sector, and to seek catalytic support from our technical and financial development partners and philanthropists. Sustained investment by our government to support integrated and coherent research is not always available. Where there is funding, it is likely to have been sourced from non-African countries. This is welcome, of course, is highly required, but it is essential to note that these may not always address the immediate pressing needs of our countries or sub-regions. We need a blended approach to funding for research in the sector. Increased funding for research as a core public good cannot be overemphasized. Investment for the purpose of research and development is as good as funding for infrastructural development. However, despite this necessity, the share of expenditure on research for development in the continent remains extremely low, and yet there are a number of good agricultural research centers located in our member states countries, our member states. Some of our highly qualified researchers are even remunerated by their institution, but they lack the resources to undertake critical study in support of the sector. We need to support and utilize this domestic expertise as much as possible. Our African government must therefore increase the annual budgetary allocation to agricultural research, while in the same token, we call on our partners to assist our resolve to technically capacitate our African research centers. The 2014 Malabo Declaration encourages member states to allocate at least a total of 1% of agricultural GDP to agricultural research. During the recent 2019 Malabo biannual review report, it was noted that only 13 out of 55 African countries have spent the full 1% of their agricultural GDP on research. Only 13, I continue to say, only 13, where we cannot go on, new innovation and technology without, supporting the research and development on the continent. Some member states were not too far from the 1%, while others fell far below the threshold of 1%. That is, for them, it is not necessary to do research. We just do agriculture like that, primitive agriculture, local agriculture. How can we increase our productivity when the demand for food is increasing every day? When our children are going to the terrorists, they have been, enrolled to go and do war, to destabilize our country, where key issues are here, agriculture. But our politicians, they don't seem to look at research, as one of the basic, the baseline for agriculture. A lot, therefore, still remain to be done in terms of our desire to enhance investment in research for development in Africa. Honorable Minister, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the African Union Commission will continue to encourage and work with institutions that are involved in generating high-quality evidence in order to fill policy gap and seize the opportunity that exists in the agriculture sector arena. For instance, the African Union Commission, through my department, DREA, is currently preparing the second African Fertilizer Summit, also known as Abuja 2, which is expected to take place sometime next year. Working closely with ReNAPRI and other key technical and financial partners, we expect to generate a progress report that will reflect advancements that have been made since the Abuja 1 declaration in 2006. With this, we expect to also provide recommendations for consideration by the head of states and government of the African Union on how we shall continue to build resilience and inclusive agricultural transformation through the effective use of fertilizer and other related agricultural inputs. Allow me, therefore, to thank ReNAPRI for the support that is being provided to DREA to realize this vision for the continent. Other areas that will require investment in the area of research include capacity building of African research institutions and across country, Africa to Africa, learning, as well as better coordination of national and regional policy research initiatives, strategic partnership building, effective communicating of research outputs through regular policy briefs, strengthening the market information system, regional food trade and logistics, women and youth in agribusiness, value chain development, innovation and technology, and nutrition security. We need to enhance agricultural mechanization to ensure that we have tools that are fit for proposed in context of Africa, of African small-scale enterprises. We need to look at promoting the resource poor to ensure that they can move up on the continuum of commercialization. For example, in the case of commodity that are high in value, but where the harvesting process is very tedious because it is done manually. So we need to mechanize that area. We must ask ourselves, what can be done to ensure effective design of and access to harvesting equipment, which is exceptionally large and out of reach of the small farmers. We also need an improved focus on policy that promotes gender development, particularly looking at empowering women and youth through social inclusion. There are definitely areas where investment for policy research and development are required. The picture is, however, not completely blooming because some gains have been made in the continent in the area of evidence-based policy reform. To mention just a few, we have seen some gain in areas such as livelihood adaptation to climate variability and climate change, despite the challenges that come with these thematic areas. This includes successes in climate-smart agriculture and conservation agriculture, as well as water development for agriculture. We have also seen movement in the area of land policy, including matters relating to large-scale land-based investments. We have also scored some successes in seed harmonization policy, energy policy, and the free trade area, as I mentioned. We continue to work together, improving these areas, and I'm happy at this juncture with the comment made by the Vice President, my dear brother Apollo of AGRA, that is ready to join us in this task force that we put post-COVID-19 recovery to work together, because we leave no one behind, to work hand by hand and make sure that we are the service, we institution, we are serving and supporting our member states on the continent. So in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, the African Union remains resolute in working with all our partners to ensure that research continues to be the foundation of good decision-making for transformation in the agricultural sector and for improved livelihood of our continent. Ladies and gentlemen, let me once again thank ReNAPRI for inviting me to be part of this event. Let me assure you of the support of the Commission in this important work that you are doing in the continent. I wish you a fruitful conference, and I look forward to receiving the key recommendations that will emanate from these important discussions. I thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for that very insightful remarks. Indeed, we are happy with those remarks. In fact, when you mentioned the Abuja 2 summit, I had alluded to that earlier, that ReNAPRI is the technical lead in providing support for the Abuja 2 in collaboration with the African Alliance for African Partnerships and IFDC. And so we look forward to engaging with you more. As I mentioned, we'll be knocking at your door and engaging with you further as we discuss and come up with very concrete way forward to improve food productivity in Africa through use of fertilizer and soil organic health. I'm also happy that you mentioned the importance of a blended approach to funding research, because research is very critical to informing the policy processes, either regionally or even continentally. So we, as ReNAPRI, we are ready to provide that support that will be needed when we are called upon. So thank you very much, and we wish you very well in your position, but also as we engage together. And finally, it's now my esteemed pleasure to invite Honorable Lobin Lowe, the Minister of Agriculture, Malawi, to deliver his remarks and officially open the 7th ReNAPRI Annual Stakeholder Conference. Mr. Honorable Lobin Lowe.
Professor George Kanyama-Phiri, Vice-Chancellor of Lilongwe University of Agriculture and Natural Resources, LUANAR, Professor Richard Nkandawire, Chairman, National Planning Commission of Malawi, and Chair of Advisory Board for Mapata Institute. Your Excellency, Ambassador Josefa Sacko, Commissioner for Rural Economy and Agriculture, African Union Commission, Ms. Chileshe Kapwepwe, Secretary General for COMESA, Dr. Apros Nwafor, Vice President for AGRA, Maura, Senior Deputy Assistant Administrator for the Bureau for Resilience and Food Security, Representative USAID, Dr. Miltone Ayieko, Chair of the ReNAPRI Board of Directors, the Malawi conveners of this conference, Director of Center for Agriculture Research and Development, CAD, Dr. Nyirongo, and Mr. William Jadza, Acting Executive Director, Mwapata, and all team, directors of all research institutes and all affiliates of ReNAPRI, all protocols observed, all distinguished participants, wherever you are in Africa and beyond. It is my greatest pleasure to be with you this afternoon to officially inaugurate this year's ReNAPRI 7th Annual Conference. First, I want to start by thanking the Secretariat for extending an invitation to my ministry for me to preside over this important function. It is a great honor to the government of Malawi by ReNAPRI to have this conference hosted by Malawi through the Center for Agriculture Research and Development or the University of Agriculture and Natural Resources, LUANAR. This is something that is not to be taken for granted, as I know that ReNAPRI had so many alternatives amongst its member institutions through which this conference could have equally been hosted. On behalf of Malawi government, and indeed on my own behalf, as Minister responsible for agriculture, let me therefore take this opportunity to virtually welcome all participants and guests to Malawi, and in particular to Lilongwe, the capital city or the home heart of Africa, for this important conference. Reflecting on the theme of this year's conference, which is the Great Reset, embedding resilience into African agriculture, this is well befitting as it has come at a time when most economies are shocked with COVID-19. And our vulnerable populations are unable to contain the devastating effects. With the lockdown imposed by many countries to contain the spread of this virus, access to food, more especially food markets, is restricted, considered. There are so many restrictions, and most countries are not importing food. This pandemic has found us with weak agriculture and food systems that cannot withstand shocks such as the COVID-19 pandemic and climate change and market-related shocks. What I've learned from the presentations by others is that COVID-19 is not just a public health issue, but also an economic issue. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, you will agree with me that great and professional minds brainstormed to come up with this film, which is relevant and timely, to come up with innovative ideas and realistic solutions that will help to strengthen African agriculture and food systems, which are vulnerable to various shocks. Issues such as climate change, degradation of natural resources and the environment, rapid population growth, poor performance of agricultural input and outward markets, and pandemics such as COVID-19 are some of the areas calling for resilience if African agriculture and food systems are to achieve increased and sustainable production for both food security and economic development of various African economies. Having read through the program of the day, I noticed there are research papers to be presented, including panel discussions. It is my expectation that this conference will come up with useful recommendations and innovative ideas to be considered by various governments on what we need to do in order to develop the resilience of our agriculture and food systems. To the Malawian delegation, and particularly those from LUANAR, including Mwapata and other researchers who are directly involved in policy-related research, be informed that my doors to my office are open. Let me emphasize, the doors to Minister of Agriculture are open. I'm available and ready to support you. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, unlike the previous annual conferences of this kind, this one has been hosted virtually due to COVID-19 pandemic, which we are all aware of. Sadly, this pandemic has denied you the opportunity to physically visit our tourist country. We have some tourism landmarks in the country. We have the lake. We are blessed with the fresh water lake. We are blessed with Mulanje Mountain, which has a peak. Ladies and gentlemen, looking at or considering what Josefa Sacko said about seed policy and the fertilizer summit, I was like, my country, my ministry has an intervention. We are implementing affordable impulse program. We are giving affordable fertilizer, very cheap, and seed to farmers. We are looking at food security and the poverty reduction at household level and national level. However, we rely on evidence-based research to provide the actual impact of this program. We rely on the research from the relevant institutions. What is it that the program has achieved? With these few remarks, if at all few, may I now declare this conference officially open, and I wish you all fruitful and professional deliberations. Thank you so much. God bless you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Lowe, for those very great remarks and for officially opening the ReNAPRI, 7th ReNAPRI Annual Stakeholder Conference. And on that note, I also want to thank the keynote speakers, all of them, for honoring our invitation, but also making very great remarks to set us off into the next 3